Okay, in the last video, we got somewhat of a basic introduction into how web pages open. We learned that when you try to open a web page, the browser requests a resource from the web server that hosts that page. Specifically, the browser requests code, usually in the form of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, that creates the web page that the users actually experience. In the last video, we started learning about HTML, beginning with the first major component of an HTML document, the head. In this video, we begin with this stripped down HTML file that you see before you, where we just have a stripped down head, because the head isn't really going to be the focus of this video, and we don't need more than this for what we plan to do. Just for reference sake, this index.html file here, I've already saved into this folder. You're going to see me come back to this folder many times well, maybe not many times, but at least once as I open this file. So anyway, so the other major section of an HTML file is the body section. This is enclosed in the body tag. A body, return. I don't want to indent that. Actually, it doesn't really matter if you indent an HTML file. It's just, I don't want to confuse you by thinking that it's important, but it indented for some reason when I hit return. Anyway, so the body tag's enclosed the body's enclosed in body tags. The body section tends to include the content, or most of the content you actually see on the web page. So there's a lot of ground that we could cover here. I'm not going to give you a comprehensive encyclopedic sense of everything that can be done in the body section of an HTML file, because the video would go on for a main era of history. What I want you to do is get a feel for how HTML works so that you're empowered to then look up specific things that you might want to do later that are a little bit more arcane or less mainstream. I want you to get a feel for the mainstream of HTML. Now, from a strictly HTML perspective, it might be most useful to think of a web page as a kind of document. So it can be thought of as having a structure like a document. Later, when we learn about cascading style sheets, we'll start touching on the idea that it can be elegant or art. And when we get to JavaScript, we'll start thinking about an interactive experience that can induce anything ranging from excitement to epileptic seizures. Well, this video is already getting away from me. So for now, let's think about a document. Well, most documents have some kind of head or header that provides a title for the overall document, and then heads or headers for the different sections of the document. The headers are defined by the H tags. And these are numbered. The larger the number, the smaller the font size of the tag, and they run from H1 to H6. So let's do a couple of examples here. H1, oops. Like I said, I'm still getting used to the, it's not that I'm still getting used to this ID, it's that I can't ever get used to it because I use so many different IDEs, so I won't take full advantage of its text suggestion abilities. Let's try H2. How about, this is a somewhat smaller header. What smaller header? So you can think of these as being like head titles for the document, overall, overall titles for sections. This is an even smaller header. H3, okay. And then down here, we'll try H4 next. H4, this is, I'll just say, and still smaller. And still smaller, smaller, slash H4, and even smaller, let's say that for H5, and even smaller. And then I think by this point, we all get it. Now, one thing about this, Sublime text editor that I'm using, it's kind of like a generalized integrated development environment, or IDE, is it keeps wanting to index these tags. It's not essential that you do that in HTML. HTML, JavaScript, CSS usually don't depend too much on your indentation. It's not like, say, Python, where it's really important. But anyway, let's save this thing and get a look at it. So we're going to go down here to where we have the page stored. And again, you can open whatever browser you want. I'm going to go ahead and open it in Chrome. And there's our headers. So you can use these as headers for different parts of the document. Now, this is a structure that should be familiar to you from the video about the head of an HTML document, where we have tags like the title tags right here that enclose sections of the head. Well, here we have an opening tag and a closing tag structure. That should be kind of familiar. But I want to really explicitly throw something in now that maybe wasn't clear before, which is the idea of a tag attribute. So let's put in a comment here. The general form of a tag attribute is going to be this: equals / closing tag / close the comment. So basically what you're looking at here for the general form of a tag attribute is you've got the tag, which is, you know, the tag name, and then you have the attribute name equals something, and it tells you something about some quality of the attribute, or it sets some quality of the attribute. So to give an example, let's talk about the title attribute, which can give an attribute a title, and we'll see how this works. I'll call this hey, this is the big boy. Okay? And I'm going to save this like so. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reload this like so. Now look what happens. When I drift over all these things, I see nothing on my mouse. But when I drift over this one, it says, hey, this is the big boy. This is the title that I've given the elements that are within this tag. So once again, in case it wasn't clear, you drift over it, says, hey, this is the big boy. It doesn't do that for any other tag, though, because I've given those other tags a title. So the title is an example of an attribute of a tag, and it basically does something. It does something to characterize the tag or to make some effect for the tag. And you're going to see a lot more examples of attributes today, but what I want you to know is the basic structure, that you can have a tag and then you can have an attribute for it. Now, one thing I need to remember for this next section I'm about to open up here. So anyway, now headers generally define the sections of our hypothetical document, and the content of those sections will likely include paragraphs. And these are enclosed in the standard paragraph tag, which looks like this. And let's create a paragraph, and I decided, rather than doing some sort of dumb repetitive Latin, which people often do, I'm going to reach for the Great Gatsby. I'm going to really class it up. Let's save this and take a look at this paragraph. We have famous, you can see the paragraph, and most of the big shore places were closed now, down to face for the last time in history was something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote that because they didn't have web development in his time, so he didn't realize it wasn't the last time mankind was going to be face to face for something commensurate to his ability to wonder. All right, I'll shut up now. So we've basically got the headings and we've got the paragraphs. Now the next thing I want to talk about is the idea that you can use tags to style the elements of paragraphs. Now, there are styling tags in HTML, and I'm going to go over them because I want you to be aware of them, but we're also going to talk a little bit about an alternative way of styling that's becoming sort of the dominant approach in HTML. But for now, let's talk old school styling by creating another paragraph, and we'll call this is a paragraph designed to, I guess, showcase things like, and now let's start doing some style tags. Let's start with a classic, the B tag, which should provide bold text. Okay? And I'm going to knock off a bunch of these before we look at them. Let's next go for the strong tag, how about, which gives you strong text. I'm going to go ahead and admit that in a lot of instances I can't tell the difference between strong and bold, but anyway, there is some difference. It exists. How about next, another classic? Let's go for italics. Okay, italics, italic. After italic, let's go for italics, close cousin, emphasize, M. Okay, and emphasized. And then after that, let's think about, how about underlined? What am I thinking here? Let's look at underlined text. So underlined is included within the U tag. And what I'm doing here is I'm just showing you the tags that are associated with all the different styles. How about the sub tag for subscript? Subscript. And the sup tag for superscript. And notice in every one of these cases, I am opening the tag and then I am enclosing the tag. So, and then whatever is in between has that styling applied to it. Superscript. And then how about marked? Let's go for marked. It's a bold move. Okay. Marked. And again, I want the text marked to be marked, and that's why I have it in the marked tags. Let's go for small text. How about? You know, I cannot guarantee that this is every one of the styling tags, and I'm probably forgetting something. But again, the purpose of this video is more to give you a feel. Let's see. How about deleted text? How about that one? That's another oldie but goodie. Deleted. That's in the del tags. Let's go with insert. Let's end it off with inserted text. I think that's INS, yes. Slash. Inserted text. I'm not going to lie, some of these I don't use that often, and I may have forgotten inserted, and it took me a second to remember it. All right, so let's save this and take a look. And now in our HTML document, and I should probably just leave it open and reload in future, but we have beneath the paragraph that we just created, come on, be gone. Beneath the paragraph we just created, we have, this is a paragraph to showcase things like bold, strong, italic, emphasized, underlined, subscript, superscript, marked, small, deleted, or inserted. Now you can be forgiven for not immediately getting the difference between bold and strong, because I certainly don't necessarily always get it, or italic and emphasized, but there is some difference, I'm sure. And somebody who really knows about type, which I don't, could probably tell you much more. They could probably write a dissertation about the differences. But what I want you to know is that you have these style tags that allow you to style elements of your paragraph this way. One of the things you can also do is you can have more than one style apply to a piece of text. So how about you can even have, and for the outside here, let's go with, how about strong? I'm just making this up as I go along, but the fact that I'm making up as I go along shows that you can kind of do whatever you want. And then within there, let's do emphasized. How about? And then let's go with, how about marked text? And then let's go for, how about underlined text? Notice what's going on here is for each of these, I opened it, closed it, and now within this, I can have, just say, more than one style at once. Okay, so let's save this and take a look. And this time I remembered not to close my browser. And as you can see, we've got a ton of styles going on in here. We've got the marked, we've got the emphasized, we've got the underlined, we've got the, what was it, bold? I guess it was strong that I used, not bold. Anyway, but you can have more than one style at once. And I'm going to put a period at the end of this sentence. Another example of something that you can do with old style styling is that you can have quote sections. Can even have, and those are enclosed in the Q tags, the regular quote. A section that is treated for all intents and purposes as a quote. Section that is treated for all intents and purposes as a quote. And then close that off. And you know what, before that, let's do the quote, but also you can also have, and you can do something called block quoting, block quote. A block quote that goes on and on and on. And what I'm going to do, and let's just copy this right here, and I'll make this, I just want to put a lot of meat on this copy. So we'll just paste, and I want it to run to more than one line is what I'm doing here with this. And paste. But notice this is the block quote that's enclosed in block quotes, and I think we're probably good with this. Let's save this, and let's reload. And there's our quote. This is the quote right here. Sorry, like I said, the mouse in this thing still sort of confounds me. And here's our block quote. Let's see. You can even have so you can have attributes of all these style quotes. An example of an attribute of a style. We could do this. An attribute of a block quote, I believe, is the citation on it, and we could make that HTTP // actually it's PS. What am I thinking? www.cnn.com, because it's the 24-hour news cycle, and they go on and on and on and on. So let's go ahead and save this. And I don't remember if the citation shows up on mouse over or not. Let's see. No, so this attribute doesn't really appear to show up anywhere. Some of these attributes are actually used for things like, search engine searching. But anyway, that's just another example of an attribute. Let me put a little bit of real estate in here so that what I'm doing is the center of the page. Okay. Now, so this is one way of formatting, but it's sort of the old school. I originally learned to web program in the, I guess, mid-1990s. By the way, I'm going to be taking breaks to take drinks here as I talk. Forgive me for this. We have this season in North Carolina where yellow pollen descends on us like some horror from a Hitchcock film, and this year it is utterly terrible, and I can barely breathe, so I'm going to need a lot of water for my throat. But anyway, where was I? Yes. So what you've seen here are sort of old school styling tags, and this is how you styled content for a long time. I think this was pretty much the only game in town when I originally learned how to style. But this is actually not the preferred route to go these days. Let me get a block in here, a comment in here. So these days, the preferred way to go is the tag name. I should have said tag name when I did this above, but to show what an attribute is. But it's what you do now is the preferred style is to say property value, and then separate varying styling elements by a semicolon. So we could have another property colon value and so on, and then close tag, obviously. Okay, so what this is basically saying is you'll have a tag and you'll declare a style attribute for it, and then you'll talk about various style properties and their values. Now I know this seems very vague and confusing, so let's give an example to put a little bit of meat on it. Let's create a paragraph, and we're going to style it, and let's color the text of it red. So color is a property value that's the color of text. Red is the value of it, and we're going to say have some red text. Okay, we're going to save, and we are going to reload, and down here you see it says have some red text. Okay, you can also mess with more than just the paragraph style. You can actually style basically any tag in HTML. So to give an example, let's have another paragraph here. We say, let's have a paragraph. And forgive me, have a paragraph. With some, how about bold green text? So one way you could do that is take an old style bold tag and say style equals color green, so they're setting the text color to green, and close that and say bold green text. Okay, and then here we'll have /b period. Let's save this, hit return, or reload here. And now we have some bold green text. I may have chosen poorly the bold green text. That actually is green. I'm not sure how much is showing up on the video that you're seeing. It looks barely green from what I'm looking at, but this is actually colored green. It's bold green text. It just isn't showing up well. I hope it's showing up well for you. It is not for me. Okay, so basically, you can also style with more than just color. I mean, you can style tons of elements within a tag. So to give you another example from the paragraph one, let's make the strong choice of having a font size of, how about 70 px, 70 pixels. And we'll say this is what 70-point font looks like. I may be screwing up my font terminologies. PX might not mean point. I tend not to think about these things. I just have a sense of what 70 looks like. And as soon as I save this and reload the web page, you too will have a sense of what 70 looks like. So let's reload. Boom. Go down. And that's what 70-point font looks like. Okay. One thing that you can't really do anymore, though, in terms of old school tags, at least I think you can't do it anymore. Let's run with you can't do it anymore, because you probably shouldn't be doing it. If there was an old school way, you shouldn't be using it. But you can't basically select your font through your font style through an old school tag. You have to use the style attribute. So let's give an example of how to do that. That is going to be the font family property, font family. And let's go, because it's really goofy looking, with Comic Sans MS. And Comic Sans, I don't think with all the fonts you have to do this, but Comic Sans is a little bit weird because you have to talk about the family, then a specific font within it. And we're going to put a semicolon here. Now, let's do two styles at once. So I'm going to make it big enough that you can see that it's in Comic Sans. So let's make this 40px. So, and we'll just say, this is an example of setting a font. Example of setting a font. Perfect. So then I save, and then I will scroll down here, and this is in Comic Sans. I don't know if you can tell, but this is that sort of weird, almost handwriting font, Comic Sans. Anyway, so that's setting a font. You can even mess with the main tags of a page, to tell you the truth. So another example is we could go back up here to where we actually declared the body, and we could, let's give it, how about a background? Yeah, let's style the body, and let's give it, so this is the style attribute. Let's give it a background color. Background color, and let's make the background color powder blue is nice. That shouldn't overwhelm other stuff I want to do. Okay. So hit save right here, okay, and I'm going to head down here, and I'm going to hit return. And what do you see here? We have powder blue up here. Okay, so basically we've messed with the background. So even the body tag. So even the body tag can be styled. Takeaway here, HTML tags can be styled. All right, now getting back down to where we were here. Okay, so we just took a look at Comic Sans. Let's briefly talk about some other older styling tags. They're still around, and they're still in pretty heavy use. They're old school styling. And looking at it, if nothing else, can give you a sense of how things have changed. These days, most people do their stuff through styling, through the new style attributes. And I'll talk a little bit more about other ways that they can do it besides just inline styling a tag. But let's give an example of another old school styling tag. This is how you center in HTML way back when. Okay, so let's before I go on to that, let's also show that you, once again, things like centering, you still can do stuff within stuff within stuff. So let's do italic, I, and let's do I, and then let's do this, and then let's make this H1. How about? And we'll say this is another header. And I am going to save and reload, and let's go look at our header. So this is how you center an HTML way back when, and this is another header. Okay, so these days the preferred way to do that, this kind of old school sort of text placement tag is you would say like a P style, and it's going to be let's see, text align center. Yeah, so text align center, text dash align center, and I'll say this is how you center these days. And if you wanted to do this for a header, you would pretty much just copy this, and let's make this, I don't know, H2, because I think I've beaten H1 to death. H2, this is how you center a header these days, and make this H2. Okay, so let's save this. So this is the newer way of centering text. So we save this, we hit return, and then down here, this is how you center these days. This is how you center a header these days. Okay, so basically there is this old school tag, but there's a new way of doing it. Another example that comes to mind, actually sitting here right now at the top of my head, is let's talk about how you indent or you create vertical space, old school versus new school. In the old school way of doing it was you used this thing, and let me put it in quotation marks here. This was like a shim that you inserted to create space, and I think the NBSP, if I recall correctly, stands for non-breaking space, but let's give an example of how this works. Okay, so basically what you would do is you would say and NBSP, and then you would just put a ton of them in. I'm just going to put a ton of them in. Paste, 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 and now, because this is like watching paint dry, I'm going to do some super pasting. Copy all these. Also, when you do this, you always end up having this deep breath that I didn't put some kind of a typo in it. Okay, and we'll say, let's just put here, this is an indented paragraph. Okay, so this non-break, we've entered a ton of these non-breaking spaces. This is the old school way of creating vertical space. We hit return, and where every other paragraph is completely left justified, and in fact, let me put a paragraph above this for contrast. I'll just say this is a normal paragraph. Okay, file, save, go back here, hit return, and what you can see is all those non-breaking spaces have, I believe that's what they're called, have inserted another paragraph for you. Let me put a little bit more real estate here so what I'm doing is closer to the center of the screen. Okay, now of course there's a modern styles version of this. So the modern styles version of this might be something like, let's say it's going to be padding left. Yeah, so padding left. So it would be P. That's not a proper tag, Peter. P. Sorry, actually, I accidentally hit my caps lock for a second. There's style equals, and we'll make this padding dash left and 5 EM, and this is how you might indent these days. If you wanted to indent, if you wanted to create some vertical space within a sentence, remember when I teach you about spans later, that you could just add padding left as a a style attribute of the spans I'm going to teach you later. It'll make sense when you see what spans are. I should probably shut up and stop saying this. But basically, let me hit return here, and there, you indented. Now, what I actually personally, this is an example where I think the new styling is better. It is only by incredibly stupid luck that I actually have these two paragraphs about equally indented. In the old days, you just kept adding non-breaking spaces until you had as much indentation as you wanted. And now you can much more precisely and consistently set what your indentation will be. I was actually thinking about, I almost did this wrong, and I might as well do the wrong thing because it's kind of cool looking. Style equals, and it was words. I don't know why, but I was in my head. I had word spacing on the brain, and let's make that 5 EM, and this is a cool spacing effect. Okay, so let me hit return just to show you this. You can do tons of things with styles by styling elements, but this is your cool spacing effect down here. I don't know why I did that, but anyway, it was just on my brain anyway. So, okay, that was pointless but cool. But here's the takeaway. If you want to declare some style inline, by which I mean within HTML tags, there's usually some old-fashioned way of doing it, like the center tag or the bold tag or whatever, or the non-breaking space tag. Non-breaking space isn't really a tag. It's more the and NBSP. It's more like a kind of like a shim that you put in there. But these days, the preferred way to set a style within tags is to use the style attribute for the tag to which the style is supposed to apply. Before proceeding, I want to step back and make clear here two things. First, the focus here has been on setting styles and HTML tags in the body of the document. While you definitely see this done, it actually probably isn't the most preferred practice at this point, the way you've been setting styles, old school or new school. Mostly styles are set in larger consolidated collections of style code I usually refer to as style sheets. But in practice, these can be provided either within style tags in this document, like in the head of it, or they can be imported from a separate CSS file. You saw both of those options in the last video, and my next set of videos are actually going to be about CSS. The advantage of this approach, this consolidated styling approach, where you set all the styles in one place, is that many style features can be put together in a class. So a class can set font type, size, color, indentation, and other style features, and then these can be invoked in tags, in the paragraph tags. So for example, we might create a class called ClassX that sets all, in our consolidated styling code, that sets all kinds of stuff like font size, color, or whatever. To associate a paragraph with that, we would then use the class attribute. And remember, we called it ClassX. So this is class X is the name we gave the class, but the class attribute, what this is saying is for this paragraph, use the styles that are in the class X. This is a paragraph that will use the styles in the class X. You don't need to know what a class is in any kind of a detailed sense at this point. It's just a collection of styles sort of under one centralized hood. The chief advantage of this is you can have a suite of style choices, and that suite can be easily invoked again and again. I don't want to go too far down this road because in the next video where we talk about CSS, we'll go much deeper into this topic. For now, I'm saying this just to set some context for all this. The second major point I want to make at this point is that I've been showing a lot of syntax for setting styles without really explaining it. However, I do hope the style settings that I've chosen to use in my examples so far have been relatively intuitive, like text align or color or background, whatever. The syntax though for these styles is basically cascading style sheets or CSS syntax, and that's actually going to be explained in my next video. I know this style stuff might seem a bit confusing, and I apologize for that. But the challenge is that it's getting harder and harder to separate HTML and CSS style styling for the purpose of addressing separate subjects. So this might be a good point to introduce the idea of block elements. Maybe we'll just take a little bit of a break from this introduce block, although I'm going to dive right back into styles probably, but introduce block level elements. A block level and contrast them with inline elements. So we're going to introduce block level elements and contrast them with inline elements. A block level element always starts on a new line and takes up the full width of the page. So maybe the most common one you see these days is the div element. And you know, sitting here now, I'm going to admit something I'm slightly embarrassed about, which is I don't know what div stands for. I don't think I've ever known. But let's just say, hi, I am a div. And if we save this and reload, we see this. Hi, I am a div. Now, you might say, okay, well, so what does that have to do with anything? I don't get what a div is. And I told you that basically what it is, it starts a new line and it takes up the full width of the page horizontally. So to see that a div is actually taking up the full set of the page, let's break my promise and immediately set another style. Let's set the background color. Again, I'm trying to use relatively simple ones. And let's make the background color here gray. I hope that will stand out against the blue. And we'll make the color of the text in it white. How about? Okay, and then I'm a gray background div with white text. Gray background div with white text. Okay, and I'm going to file save. Okay, and let's go ahead and reload this right here. And boom. What you see here is that this div that I just declared, it's the gray background takes up the entire horizontal width of the web page. Remember, a block level element starts a new line and takes up the entire vertical horizontal space. If I'm saying vertical, I apologize. It takes up the entire horizontal space of the page. So a div starts a new line and takes up the entire horizontal space of the page. And by painting the background of this color gray, I was able to show you that the div really is taking up the entire width of the page. Later, you will see things like style classes that can be glommed onto divs, for example, or IDs or whatever. To me, this is the main role of a div. A div basically creates an element to which you can attach all sorts of stuff like IDs, styles, classes, attribute, all kinds of attributes can be attached to the div tag. Think about it as just being something that contains a bunch of stuff for the purpose of attaching a bunch of attributes to that stuff. We'll touch more on IDs below, but for now, just remember that we can attach an identifying name to HTML tags like block level div elements. So now a div spans the entire page horizontally, but you can also put a ton of stuff in it vertically. So let me create another div where we do that. But when I create this div, why don't I give it an ID? What the heck? So this is the ID attribute. And what this means is that I've basically named this thing, and I'm going to make I've named this div div1. That's its name. That name identifies it. So among all the divs that you see on this web page, this one has the ID div1. And let me color. Maybe get red this time. And I will make the text color white because I'm not too original. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 paragraphs in it. So a div is not a paragraph, and to show that, I'm just going to stick 2 paragraphs here. I'm a red background div with white text. And for the next paragraph, why don't we go grab our Gatsby paragraph and stick it in here. Here we go. Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald, once again, you're up to bat. Okay, so down here, we'll paste this, and I'll close out this div. Oh. Okay, so now let's reload this. And here's our new div. The div has 2 different paragraphs. A div is not like a paragraph. It can contain stuff like paragraphs within it. Again, the purpose of a div to me is that you can set all kinds of attributes and junk up here. I could have set a class. I could have said class equals, I don't know, class Z. Another style class we did, or whatever. And basically what a div is, you can think of it as a container that you can use for the purpose of attaching stuff like IDs and styles to everything that lies within it. So a block level element spans the page horizontally and starts, let me return here to give you a little bit of better working real estate for looking at this. A block level element spans the page horizontally and starts new lines. It contains stuff like paragraphs, but what if you just want to do something, say, inline? So by that I mean something that applies to just part of a line. Well, for that you use an inline element. Inline elements, as opposed to block elements, don't start a new line and take up only as much horizontal real estate as is necessary. So perhaps the most famous example of these that serves as the kind of analog or foil for a div or whatever you want to call it as a general purpose vehicle for attaching stuff like IDs, styles, whatever, is the span tag. So to give you an idea of how that works, let's create a paragraph here. And let's say this is a paragraph. We are going to apply a, let's say, red, because again, I'm not too original, red background and white text. And then what I say here is, because I'm going to apply it here, I'm going to say span, not spam, span, style equals background color red and again, let's white text because I'm not too original. And I'll close this, and then to just one part of one sentence. And we'll close this span right here, and not to the rest. So this is an example of a span as an inline thing. And again, spans by themselves, just like divs, don't do anything. Think of them more as being things that you can use as sort of vehicles for attaching styles, IDs, whatever. I could have said ID equals, I don't know, span 47. I don't know, whatever. I could have said that. All right, so that would identify this as the 47th span. And then I could hit return, and here we go. The span applied to just one part of one sentence and not the whole paragraph. Okay, so span and div are probably among the most famous examples of blocks and inline elements as general purpose vehicles for IDs, styles, and such. But in HTML, there are actually a lot of block and inline elements. Let's look at a couple of other examples. We begin with block elements. Though the div tag may be the most hard used block element these days, there are others, and just let's give a few examples. Well, for one example, headers, which we've learned about, the H1 through H6 tags, are examples of block level elements. Now remember, I said a block level element in general should start a new line. Let's do, this is a header. And in our file here, on the same line, I'm going to put H1. This is another header. Close this out. I'm going to save this, and let's reload. And because I think this might be getting a little hard for you guys to read, I'm going to move this down here so it's a little more central to the page. Let's reload. And what you see here is these two headers are on two different lines, despite being on the same line in this file. Why? A block level element always starts, well, it nearly always starts a new line. So the header tags are examples of legacy block level elements in that they are from much earlier versions of HTML. The current HTML standard is called HTML5, and let me discuss for a second what current standard means. Basically, this is the version up to what your up-to-date browsers are going to support. HTML5 is really a standard. It introduced some things to HTML and it dropped other things. Now, one thing you have to be very careful about is that just because HTML dropped some features of earlier versions of HTML does not mean that the browser companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple, etc. complied in the sense that their browsers that they offer, their current versions, don't have dropped that feature or don't support that feature. Indeed, below, I think I'm going to give an example where something was supposed to be dropped and it wasn't dropped. Now, when you talk about a new standard and dropping old stuff from HTML, there's really two words that you see, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but this is how I approach it. The two words are deprecated and obsolete. Deprecated is stuff they don't really want you to be using and can be dropped in the future. Obsolete is something that could be dropped. So all of this may seem sort of confusing, and you can be forgiven for feeling that way. I think lots of folks that have been in this game a long time would agree that on balance, the evolution of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript has been a good thing because it's allowed more and more exciting possibilities in web design. But evolution is often a sort of confusing mess. And unfortunately, since you're learning HTML, you're getting in relatively late in the game, and it might seem a little confusing at first, but roll with it and it will start to make sense. So let's take a look at some of the new blocks that have come with HTML5. And one new block, I'm not really going to do anything with it, but I want to make you aware of the fact that it exists, is the canvas block. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. And when I save it, I'm going to reload this, and you'll think, wow, the canvas block, that's a block. That's amazing. It did abso-freaking-lutely nothing. Well, the thing with the canvas block is what it's supposed to do is create a canvas on which you can draw. And to make this a little bit clearer, let me, I guess maybe an ID wasn't the, let me go with, let me make this canvas fairly large. Width equals, about 600, and height, oh, what the heck, let's go with 600 again, equals 600. And style, now this is what I should have done from the beginning. Let's give this thing a border. Border 3 pixels wide, solid, and then this should be black. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Close this out, and close this out, and call it a canvas. Now let's save this, and now we're going to find out what that. By the way, this thing right here is just a color code. We'll talk more about those as time goes by, but that's just a code that represents a color. And here we go. What you see here is this is our new canvas, and I purposely gave it a border. What a canvas basically is it creates a canvas that allows you to draw stuff. So this is a new feature with HTML5, and the canvas feature is actually kind of important, or is likely to become increasingly important. It's sort of a direct competitor with the other major way of drawing things on a website, or having a drawing canvas, which is something called a scalable vector graphic, or SVG. I'm going to do a series of videos on the D3 data visualization library, and you're going to learn all about scalable vector graphics. But both the canvas and the scalable vector graphic is basically a way of creating a canvas on which to draw things. So anyway, this canvas tag gives you a specific space to draw. You usually draw stuff in the canvas with code enclosed and script tags. I thought about showing you an example, but I decided it'd be getting too far afield of HTML. I'll make a video or videos about the canvas tag at some point in the future, but for now, I really just want you to be aware that the canvas tag exists. Let me just double check how I'm doing for time. Not too bad. Okay. So another, let me get back up here. Example of a new block level element should be like, we could talk about like the main and article tags. These are new to HTML and are only supported in HTML5, which again is the current version of HTML. I've not seen them used a huge amount yet, but that may be more a commentary on my own ignorance than anything else. But I don't know that they've been a wild success so far, but I don't think that means you're not going to see more and more of them. So the main tag basically is of a document contains the main content of a document. It's meant to contain the stuff that's sort of the main content that's unique to the document. Here's the main stuff in the document. And when I close the paragraph tag. By the way, paragraph tags, you can actually get away with not enclosing them. And it's a common sloppiness in HTML that you're going to see that people won't install them. And while I'm at it, let me introduce article tags too. So main. How about the article tag, article, and then here we'll put H1, and then H1, this is my first content. Articles are independent content that can be distributed on its own. Basically, that's the official title of what it's supposed to be. This is my first content, and I'm going to hit return right. Oop, right. Peter can't type. I'm going to bring this back to here, and let's say here's the first set of stuff in this document. P. Here is the first set of stuff in this document, and hit delete, and then down here I'll put how about another article, okay, and then I'll have H1, and this is the second content. So I'm putting headers in here, the second, but it shows you can put all kinds of junk inside of an article. Content, and then this is the second P. This is the second set of stuff. And in fact, you know what I'm going to have to do here? I don't think you can have two main tags, sets of main tags in the documents. Let me first comment this one out and save. I've just commented out, save the file. Let's take a quick look at this here. We hit return, and it just looks like an ordinary paragraph. The main tag did nothing. Let's go back up here. Let's comment this part out. And then down here we have, and then here, let's get rid of this comment. And down here, let's, you know what? I needed to enclose this comment. That's what's wrong. Okay. And then here, let's, article should be, yes. Okay. Let's take a look at this here. Let's save. And remember, this is two sets of H1s and paragraphs. And what we see here looks like two sets of H1s and paragraphs. To cite another example of a block level element HTML, you have the section tag. This is just meant to denote the sections of a document, like chapters, headers, footers. So obviously this doesn't appear to have done anything with styling, and the reader, or the listener, I should say, might ask, what's the point of tags like main, section, or article? These represent kind of a new tag in HTML5. I've seen called a semantic tag. They're more about defining what things are in a document in terms of narrative or document structure, I guess for lack of better terms, and don't necessarily intrinsically affect styling in the sense that the H1, the H6 tags, for example, do. I think the reason for these new semantic tags is that folks had increasingly been using div and span for everything, meaning like headers, footers, main document bodies, etc. And of course, there was no standardized identification system for what was what when you put everything inside of a div or a span and then style it according to some style that you created in consolidated style code. So as a result, there was a sense that this had led to a gazillion approaches to structure in HTML files, and the narrative structure of documents and their structure in sections was becoming hard to figure out for those looking at code, looking at things from the code side. I would guess, for example, that the lack of a set of common structure tags was making it harder for search engines to identify the distinct elements of a document. I'm not sure how much these semantic tags have caught on with programmers. I know that up until now I've not personally used them much, and I've not seen them much. But none of this means that we shouldn't know about them. I think at some point it may come to be true that if, for instance, if you want to get the most out of your pages in terms of, say, search engine exposure, you might want to look into these semantic tags. Maybe as a follow-up, I'll do a little bit more of a formal video about the semantic tags, but I basically want to make you aware of them. They're basically about painting what the parts of the document are in a standardized way that things like search engine bots that crawl the web can pick up on. I guess let me add one other thing. In the last video, I likened HTML to the skeleton in the body. In that sense, the semantic tags, which really define document structure, they do seem natural and sensible, maybe even inevitable. HTML is perhaps best thought of as being about the underlying structure of the programming behind a web page. So semantic tags do seem appropriate from this vantage point. They relate that underlying structure to the actual narrative structure the reader encounters. All right, anyway, let's turn to inline elements. There are a bunch of others beyond span, including some new to HTML, but let's start with some oldies and goodies. A classic old school inline element is break. Let's give an example. Let's take a break. Notice, by the way, I don't bother closing this. I'm just going to give it a paragraph. In fact, when I did the suggestive text in Sublime, let me do that again. It doesn't even attempt to close the break tag. So let's hit return and see what this, or save and reload the web page and see what this looks like. So we reload the web page and this looks like a break. See, let's take a break. I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, long-winded guy teaching me HTML. Didn't you just say earlier that inline elements don't create a new line? Well, you know, I did. And yet the break tag is usually considered an inline element. You know, get past it. Most of the styling, the old school styling tags that you saw before are considered inline elements. So like the italics tag, the emphasis tag, the bold tag, the underline tag, they would all be considered inline elements. In general, there are fewer inline elements that are new with HTML5. In fact, I can't think of any off the top of my head sitting here now. Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head now. That doesn't mean there aren't new ones that are new to HTML5. It means that I'm getting my old and my brain is going to mush. So there are actually a lot more inline and block elements than what I've just talked about. I mainly wanted to let you know what an inline and block element were. And this video could go on forever if I spent time talking about all block and inline elements. You know, what I mainly wanted to say first of all, is to give you a feel for the two concepts, and second, give you some examples of them. And third, get across the idea that HTML5 has brought changes, especially with regard to new block level elements that are designed, at least in part, to better characterize what the elements of your document represent from a structure standpoint. I encourage you to learn more about block and inline elements and suggest starting here for more information about them. Let me point you to a pretty good place to go. Go to https:// this is a great resource, by the way, if you want to learn, if you want an online reference for web programming. W3 Schools. I can't tell you how often I visit them because I just forget how to do something. /HTML/HTML_blocks.asp. Okay, and close that out. By the way, note that this address ends in ASP. ASP, you're gonna see lots of cases where you have addresses that end in ASP. ASP stands for Active Server Page. In the first video about HTML, I mentioned that when you try to open a web address in a browser, the server sends a request for a resource, which is namely the code that generates the content that the user is supposed to see at that web address. There's an old school way of doing this by providing a static file that contains the code, starting with an index file, oftentimes called index.html. But there's also this new school way whereby server-side programs assemble the code and provide it to the browser. Well, ASP would be an example of just such a server-side assembly technology. So moving on, I also want to mention IDs in the HTML context. We already mentioned IDs once or twice, but we can attach IDs to HTML elements defined by tags. So basically an ID is a type of attribute. We touched on this before, but now let's take it a little bit deeper about what you can do with tags. Just a very quick look at tags. So let's call this para1 equals para1. And this is a paragraph with an ID attached to it. Okay, so what do you do with an ID like this? Well, you know, an example of what you can do with an ID like this is because it identifies the paragraph with that, we could do JavaScript. So here I'm creating a script tag, and in fact, it's not skipped, it's script. I can't tell you how many times I've hunted for an error in something I've programmed up because you know, I just, honestly, I just can't spell. So let's say get element by ID. This is one of the basic JavaScript commands. You don't need to worry about this much. You're going to be taught JavaScript later. But I wanted to sort of give you the example here that we're going to grab para1. So this is an example of what's going on here is that JavaScript would, basically what it would do with get element by ID para1 is it basically creates a variable x and it associates with it what's in para1. And actually to see how this works, I'll give you one of your first tastes of console here. So there's a way that you can print things to screen to see what they are. It's called the console. I don't think you should worry about it too much, but there's a way you can log things to screen. And remember, we just created this variable x that we associated with the element. Let's see, what does it say here? It's going to embarrass me by giving me a hard time. It says console is not a function. Oh, oops, I know what I did wrong. I forgot to put log. Console.log x. Now, it said for console.log x, it said PID para. This is does that look familiar? Yes, it's the paragraph that we associated with para1. And what's going on here in this JavaScript is I said variable x is go to the overall HTML document, get element by ID, which means get an element with an ID, and then I indicate what the ID was. And that ID is associated with this paragraph. So it grabbed this paragraph and it associated that paragraph with the variable x. So this is an example of what IDs do for you, is I've basically uniquely identified this paragraph as para1, and then when I go looking for para1, it grabs it. Okay, let me give a little bit more real estate so I'm in the center of the page coding for you. What's really important to understand at this point is that we can attach IDs to specific HTML tag elements for the purposes of referencing those particular tag elements later. This capability will become very important later when, for example, we turn to JavaScript. All right, so what else? Let's embed an image. You can embed images in an HTML page, and to do that, use the img tag. And let's enclose it. Oh no, wait, sorry. img tags don't enclose. img is an example of a tag that doesn't enclose. So the img tag usually has to come with an attribute called source that tells you what the source image file is. I might have a whole long web address to it, but since it's just in the same folder as this, I created, and in fact, let me give it a title. Equals I am the Senate. Okay. So what's critical here is not the title, but the image tag and the source, which is Palpatine. I kind of instantly regret adding that title because I don't want to confuse you. So now look, we have a picture of a Palpatine, and when I put the mouse over it, it says, I am the Senate. Sorry, I'm a Star Wars nerd, so you're going to have to put up with endless amounts of dumb Star Wars stuff. This is a very static image. It's just a JPEG. You can also put in images that are, that move around. So let's put in a more dynamic images. So let's put in, I'm going to start a new paragraph. By the way, an image is an inline tag, so I really need to start a new paragraph so that of both images on the same line. img source. I have one here of one of the greatest American heroes who ever lived, Mr. Ronald Ulysses Swanson. Reload, and down here you see that this is a GIF. You can see the animation of the GIF. Okay. You can also embed videos in HTML, and you can do this via something called an iframe. And let's go to, let's embed something really corny. Let's embed Men Without Hats Safety Dance. So let's embed Men Without Hats. I apologize for that brief 80s corniness. You usually embed a video in something called an iframe, and we're going to talk a little bit more about iframes, but for now let's just take a first look at them in the context of embedding a video. So the iframe tag, and you have to provide a source again, And I'm going to put this in like so, and then you just paste in the YouTube source, and that's the source address, and I'm going to save this, and I am then going to hit return. And it's not 100% clear this is going to work, by the way. No, see, it didn't really want to work. Actually, let me put it on another line. It might not have liked being on a... It's not necessary. And by the way, an iframe is also an inline element. It doesn't necessarily start a new line. I believe an iframe is an inline element. But it doesn't start new lines anyway. So here it didn't want to put this in, and you might think, okay, well, Peter, your really weird technology doesn't work. Well, what's going on here is that YouTube videos can be very particular about the formatting to put them in. So fortunately, a lot of video sites, and YouTube is no exception, have this little embed link down here, and the embed link allows you to... Oops, let me... Sorry, I guess I don't internet enough. Let's go to the share, embed, and I'm just going to copy all the way. Hopefully that's all. Oh, brother. Sorry, share, embed, and then, oh, brother almighty. Okay. Why does it keep doing that to me? Share, embed, and then brother. Finally, sorry about that, folks. It's late and my typing is going. Let's create another paragraph, and let's stick in this YouTube version of the embed. Now it's still enclosed with an iframe on the outside, but what you see here is it sets the width, the height, a frame border. It allows certain YouTube video junk, and it allows full screen. So let's save this. It's basically setting it in a style that YouTube wants to set it in. Now this should load. Did I forget to save it? P iframe file, save, and then down here I have to hit return. And why is it not coming? What have I done wrong here? Iframe, PP, iframe. Why is this not appearing? Let me try this. P test. By the way, it's actually good to see you guys have you guys see me work through this. And HTML does not always cooperate. That's an unfortunate fact of life. And in fact, something is going on here that, oh, test. It's just not showing up at all. Iframe width, 560, 315. Hideous, frame border equals 0, allow accelerometer, allow full screen. Close that out, and then /iframe. This should be showing up. Let me try this. Maybe it actually doesn't like having a actually, you know what? It might not like having a paragraph tag in front of it. I bet you that might be what it is. No, it still doesn't show up. What the heck is wrong? Let me make sure. Let's view the page source and make sure that's coming through. And oh, Peter, you idiot. You do have to enclose iframes. I forgot to enclose this iframe. So, just to be clear, this is an example how you go through mistakes. Is I stupidly forgot you do have to close an iframe. It's not like an image. I messed up. And by not enclosing the iframe here, it thought that this was one continuous, completely not understandable block of code about a YouTube video. But yeah, now it should finally reload. There we go. So if you ever want to watch Men Without Hats on a web page, you're welcome. Okay. So let's go down here and let's go down to, so let's talk about, I guess at this point, let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is, HTML means hypertext markup language. What the heck is hypertext? It almost sounds as if it's something from Star Wars, like, Chewie, we have a malfunction. Check the hypertext repair manual and never tell me the odds. Well, according to Wikipedia, Hypertext is text displayed on a computer display or other electronic devices with references, hyperlinks, to other text that the reader can immediately access. W3.org, which is obviously massively cooler than Wikipedia, says hypertext is text which is not constrained to be linear. So what the heck does that mean? A hypertext document is basically one from which you can open other documents, typically by simply clicking on a link. So now let's learn how to make a link. And a link is an inline element. In this, how about this is the simplest version of a link. And let's make the link. So the link starts with A, and then you have this href, which is an attribute which stands for hypertext reference, and that's the address you're going to go to. And why don't we, with an eye toward future videos, go to, how about D3's website, d3js.org, Mr. Mike Bostock, I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, and we'll say target. Remember, we could set targets above. When we were talking about in the head section, we were talking about the base meta tag, and you could choose to open links in your current page, which was self, and a blank page, your parent page, blah, blah, blah. You can set a target for where you're going to open a hypertext link that you open. So let's set open it in a blank page. And we can, usually, you give it some sort of you close this in the A tag, and you give the link some sort of link text like, let's visit D3. D3. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and save. And I am going to reload. And down here we have our very first hypertext link. And I say we do the incredibly bold thing, and we click on it. And now it's taken us to a new blank web page. And this is the site, https://d3js.org, the D3 data-driven documents site. Okay. So here I use text to indicate a link, but you could also use, you could use images. So let's do, let's copy this right now. Oop. And let's instead make this, say, the Palpatine image. img src equals, and it was palpatine.jpg. JPEG, and I'm going to save this, and let's just reload this whole mess and see what it looks like. And now we have the text version of it. So I can click on this and just say, yes, yes, good, let the HTML flow through you, and I can click on it, and it leads me to the data-driven documents page. Okay, so, and you can also have links to other things too. So you can have a link to, you can have a mail link, for example. So let's do an email link. This is distinct from the email, from the message contact us forms many websites have. This is just a basic email link. That would be href equals, and then you give it the mail to, and then how about, I'll just give, I don't know, Trump at whitehouse.gov. I don't know. I don't have no idea what that's his address, but anyway, and you could say email President Trump. And then close this off, and then let's save this. Let's go ahead and reload. And now you have this link to email President Trump, and if you double click on this, it's going to look for a mail program that you could then open this to email President Trump. If you Jen Chosen email program, it would open up and it would set you up with the email address Trump@whitehouse.gov. I really don't think that's President Trump's email address. I just made that up off the top of my head. Please, all of you, do not either send praise or fury to that address, because it's probably some, I don't know, some person with like a spoof account who's going to, well, maybe they'll deserve it, I guess, for having a spoof account. But anyway, so another thing that you can do in HTML is you can nest one site in another. You do this with an iframe, which you've already seen, and technically that's exactly what you were doing when you embedded a YouTube video. You were embedding the site for the YouTube video in the HTML page. It's just that it didn't work the first time, if you recall, because YouTube has all these things they want to do to make it look pretty on the page so it will show up correctly. Here's a basic example that will hopefully get you a little bit more obvious a sense than the YouTube case. So let's open up iframe source equals so before I did this, started this lecture, I actually tried putting in CNN, and it wasn't opening because it was giving me a ton of trouble. I'm not really sure why, but it's not always a guarantee that pages open neatly in iframes. But let's go ahead and save, and let's reload this. And there's WRI's site. Now it's too small for you to really see. I mean, I could scroll down. Also, because an iframe is an inline element, I need to go ahead and make a new paragraph. And then down here, what I'm going to do is, let's make the WRL site a little bit bigger. So we'll have iframe source equals https://www.wrl. And again, WRL is just our local news agency. And let me make this a little bit bigger by adding two new attributes. You sort of saw them above with the YouTube example. The height attribute equals, maybe I used, and I guess I used it also in the Canvas example, 500 and 500. And the width, let's make the height a little higher. Let's make it 600. And let's make the width 900. Hopefully that will cause a reasonably decent looking page to open. Okay. All right. Let's hit save, and let's reload the page, and it should open up a second. It's just taking a second to open. Here's WRL's website opened up on our page. So we've embedded WRL's web page in our web page. I don't think WRL would care that I'm doing this because I'm teaching people how to use HTML. I probably would not get in the habit of willy-nilly putting other people's pages in your web pages, though, because there might be issues about proprietary issues or whatnot. But you could write several pages of your own and embed them. Sometimes this nesting through iframes works, and sometimes it doesn't. Like I said, my first try was to put in CNN.com, and it didn't. I just got some kind of weird error. I might have been able to figure out what the error was and fix it, but I didn't bother. So, by the way, I've been speaking about, since I'm down here with iframes, let's talk frames. I've been speaking about HTML as the latest internet standard. I mentioned that HTML5 introduced some new elements to HTML and retired some others. However, I also mentioned that the browser companies are not necessarily adhering to this. Well, a great example of something that's been rendered obsolete and shouldn't be supported anymore is what's called a frame tag. It's basically quasi like an iframe tag. Basically, this was another means of having more than one distinct web page on the same page. So let me give you an example of how that worked. I'm going to save this so I can not worry about it for now. Let's create a new file, and I'm going to create two frames. I'm just going to call them frame A and frame B. So I'm going to create two websites that I'm going to embed in another website. So let's call this HTML. And why don't I save it so I don't have to worry about save as, and we'll call this an HTML file, and we'll call this call it frame A. Oops. A.html. Okay, and let's go ahead, and I am not gonna have much of a head for this, just head / that's it. And then let's have a body And then within the body, let's have just a paragraph that says this is one frame. This is one frame. Okay. And close this tag off. And again, though, people get sloppy about closing these off. Let's save this. I'm going to copy this whole thing here. And I'm going to create another new file. And I'm going to call this one file save as HTML. And this one will be frame B. .html. Save. I'm going to paste this and write this is another frame. Okay. Now, let's create a web page that basically brings in these frames. So, new file. Let's call this frame example. Save as frame example.html. And let's make sure we call it HTML. I want to call it HTML because it's an easy way to spot mistakes and tag mistakes. But anyway, let's say HTML. Okay, it wants to put all that in. I don't really care if it puts all that in. I never noticed that before, so Sublime will nicely put all that stuff in for me. Anyway, let's create something called a frame set. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have my frames come in as rows, and I'm going to have them equal, say 33%. Yeah, 33%, 33%, 33%. So what this is saying is I'm going to bring 3 web pages in, and I'm going to have each of them count for, and we'll close that off. And then I'm going to have the first frame, let's say source. You have to give a source for the frame, and we'll make that one frame A dot HTML. And the next frame, we'll make it, why don't we make it WRAL again? Because again, I'm not too original this late at night. https://www.wral.com. Boom. And then the third frame, we'll make it frame B. Source equals frame. Now remember, this is something that should be dropped by the browsers per HTML5. It shouldn't work, okay? And knowing me, I've created a coding error and it won't work, but it should work. And let me go back to frame example, open it up here, and for some reason it didn't work. What did it not like? Inspect, console, 33, what did it not like? What did you not like? View page source. Yeah, that's all in there. I'm not sure what the problem is here. HTTPS WRL frame set rows equals 33%, 33%. You know, one thing it may not like is it may not like the fact that I have these spaces here. So let's get rid of all this junk about a head too. I don't want to add anything confusing here. Doc type HTML, frame set rows, frame set 33, 33, 33, frame A, frame B, frame. Oh, I know what the problem is. With frames, you can't have a body tag. Blah. Sorry, the old style frames, you're not supposed to have a body tag here. That's what I did wrong. Anyway, let me reload this. The frame example is right here. I'm going to close this console log. The console log, I opened it because I was looking for errors. Again, you'll learn more about that in the future. And so this is one frame. This is another frame. This is the WRL frame. Officially, according to HTML5, browsers are not supposed to support this. And I think that the reason they originally wanted these dropped is something called a cross-frame attack, which was a type of security vulnerability that the browsers have gotten rid of. But the main thing I want you to take away from this is that this is an example of something that was supposed to be dropped from the HTML5 dropped, and I think the browsers were supposed to drop it, yet they still support it. So And the thing is, you can go to places like Stack Overflow. They've been saying for years that, any minute now they're going to drop frame support to browsers, and they haven't done it for years since HTML5 came along. So it's a really weird process because HTML5 involves dropping some things, but or they want some things dropped, but it's not clear the browser companies are going to cooperate. But I guess what I want to do is simply instill to you the idea that the standards for HTML are changing and evolving, and it's a good idea to try to keep up with them. But the thing is, it's not necessarily the case that it's not necessarily the case that the browser companies are necessarily going to completely cooperate with the new standards. Anyway, let me cover one last thing, and then I think I'm going to call it a night. Let me cover lists. How about, all right? Yeah, so let's clean up a bit with lists. I'm going to create a list here, and this UL tag means basically unordered list. There's no particular order to the list, and you'll see what the difference between unordered and ordered list in a minute. But let's give this thing some style, and let's say list type. That list style type right down here. Let's give it a disk, and you'll see what the disk is in a second. Just roll with me for a second. And so this is the list, and then the elements of the list you indicate with an li tag. So opening li tag and then closing li tag. And let's make this list bacon, and then how about eggs, and how about then pancakes. This is what my son would call a smashing breakfast. Pancakes. Okay. Back when I had a metabolism that had any kind of speed, I would have called it a smashing breakfast. Let's hit save. Let's reload our web page here. And now down below this we have this unordered, this is WRL. It's what we're waiting for is various elements of WRL to add, but you can see this unordered list: bacon, eggs, pancakes. Let's try. Well, first of all, remember when you learned about block level elements above? Block level elements always start with a new line and take up the full width horizontally. Well, basically, the unordered list UL and list LI tags are examples of block level elements. But and notice as well down here that you have these little disks in front of it, little disky things in front of the various elements list. Well, let's give an example of how this style worked a little bit. Let's make this instead squares. We'll do the same list, but we'll just make it square. Square. And it would be nice if I could spell square correctly. And save. And reload. And now we have the same, you know what, let me blow this up. Let me go to zoom. Okay. Now you see here that you have these round disks and these square disks, okay? Now this was an unordered list. We can also do an ordered list, and I'm going to minus, plus, okay. We can also do an ordered list. Let's go back and do an ordered list up here. And so the UL meant unordered list. I'm sure you're going to be shocked to learn that OL means ordered list. And I'm not going to bother styling this ordered list at this point. But within the ordered list, you still have the familiar LI tags. The ordered list is still a block level element. And now let's make it in order of importance. Bacon, yeah, I think definitely it's a strong move, but I'm going to put eggs in front of pancakes. Bacon, eggs. I don't know if my son would do the same. Eggs, and then pancakes. Okay, so let's save this and take a look at our first ordered list. Down here we have. And WRL is not loading for some reason right now. But here's an ordered list right here. And once again, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. And head down here so you can look. Now we have an ordered list. So like I said, ordered list is yet another block level element. And within the ordered list, you can change. Here it's ordered by 1, 2, 3, but you could order it by uppercase. Let's see if I can remember. It's uppercase letters. So let me copy this. Oops. Paste. And then down here, paste. And then the type would be, let's make it uppercase letters, and I believe that is simply a, I think. And let's go back here, hit return, and now we have an ordered list that's ABC, uppercase. If you wanted it to be, well, let's make it lowercase letters. I believe that is type equals A, I think, the lowercase a. Save. Let's head back here. Let's hit return, and now it's lowercase. What else can you do? I believe you can do uppercase and lowercase Roman letters, and you can do that with the large I and the small I. I'm just going to do the uppercase capital. I'm sorry. You can do uppercase Roman numerals, capital I, lowercase with lowercase I. But let me go ahead and just I'll do uppercase. So this is Roman numbers. Let's see. And in fact, to make this really clear, let's add the other really, really important thing in life, which is obviously coffee. Coffee's really by far number one, but you know, I don't feel like rearranging the whole list. I just want to show you Roman numerals. So let's hit return, and I believe this, yes, there we go. There you have uppercase Roman numerals. If you wanted to make them lowercase, you use a little I. Another thing that you can do in HTML, and I think this is what I'll maybe round out with, is you can make tables. Let me make a relatively simple table. The tables are enclosed in table tags, which are block level elements. Table, okay. And then within them, what you have is you have rows, and the rows are blocked off by these TR tags, okay? And let me do this here. And then within a row, you have the header row. So let's go with TH. All right, and this, let's make a table of trucks. Make, so this is one column, header, TH model. So this is the header. The TH means it's a header, TH year. TH, okay. And now let's create another row. And to create another row, we put in another TR. And now what we do is we have TD. Because TH meant the head, TD is a data. I guess it means data. I don't know what the D stands for. Maybe it stands for data. For some reason I think it stands for data, but I could be wrong. So let's make the first car. Let's start off strong. Let's go with the Porsche 911 2018. And TD. 2018. Now let's create another row. Let's do TR. TD, so this is another row of the table. Let's next make this the Ford F-150 2016. Ford TD F-150 TD, and then we'll make it the 2016 because I don't know, that's the year of my truck, 2016. Although I don't drive a Ford, so this is getting weird. Let's add in something that's, let's say another row, let's say TR, let's say, how about the 2015 Toyota Camry? And then we'll call it a list, or a table, excuse me. Toyota Camry. And then let's go down here and say, I don't remember what year I made it, but honestly, what difference does it make? And let's hit save. And let's reload here. And here's our little table. You can do things with tables to style them, to give the table borders between the cells and whatnot. It has no visible border lines in this case, but we could have styled it to do this. Maybe I'll talk about styles for tables when I talk about styles. I don't know. I just wanted to make you aware that you could make a table in HTML. And like I said, the table tag is another example of a block element. So I think that I have done enough for now, and I've talked for a while, and my throat is starting to hurt, and it's an hour and 35 minutes, and I suspect your ears are starting to hurt. This is not all of HTML, but I think it's starting to give you a pretty good feel for what HTML is and how you code in HTML. And there might be things that you want to learn about in HTML that I didn't talk about today, or there might be specific tags that you want just as a reference. Once again, a good place that I always recommend going, I use it a ton myself, is this w3schools.com. And you'll look that they have references, and here's like their HTML tag reference. And everything you want to know about a certain type of tag is in there. So anything that you wanted to, country codes, Jesus, look at these tags over here. URL encoding, HTML tags. I mean, look at all these HTML tags, all this junk that I didn't cover. It doesn't, and I think this site right here, by the way, would be an example of a syntax tag. I'm sorry, a semantic tag. It would be an example of a semantic tag. So there's tons of HTML tags, and I didn't cover them all because the reality check is the video would be 80 hours long if I covered them all. And it's not necessary for me to cover them all because my goal in this video was to give you a feel for how HTML worked and talk about some particularly important tags that you should know. And honestly, I'm going to be really frank with you. I don't know every single one of these tags. I'm not going to lie, because some of them I don't think I've ever used. Some of these tags you'll run into later, like the button tag, and we talk about, where did the hell did we go? There we go. We talk about JavaScript. Well, we're going to introduce like the button tag a little bit. We'll return to that. You do not need to know every one of these tags off the top of your head, and there's a reason you have this wonderful resource called the Internet that has references like this w3schools.com, and there's references down here. You have HTML references. You have down here of CSS references. Like I said, the purpose of this was to give you a feel for how HTML works, and I think I've done that. And I think I've gotten you in a position where you can start to learn on your own further as you write stuff. And if you're not sure how to do something in HTML, like you're not sure how to put a button in HTML, just Google tag for putting a button in HTML. Okay, I mean, Google is your friend too, and very quickly you'll get the name of the tag, and then maybe the name of the tag comes up. The first search result isn't w3schools.com, but once you have the name of the tag, I would then go in here and look at the tag reference, go down, check out the tag. Like here's their whole discussion of the iframe tag, and you can learn all about the tag. By the way, one of the other beautiful things about the W3 Schools that I think is really nice is they really bring front and center stuff like which browsers support tags. So this is basically Chrome. This is Internet Explorer, Edge. It's interesting though because they're going to have to redo all their Edge stuff because there's a brand new Chromium Edge, Firefox, Safari, and Opera. It just gives you some sense. Now, in the browser world today, the king of the hill is kind of Chrome, but it's good to have stuff that is as widely useful as possible. It tells you about how this has been, the support for this standard has been evolving across HTML4 and HTML5 and earlier versions of HTML. So just Google, like, basically, what is HTML frame for doing whatever, for a button in Google, and that will bring you back that it's the button tag. Then come here to w3schools.com and read about the tag. But you're now in a position where you know the basic structure of HTML files, and I think you're starting to get the logic of how HTML and its tag-driven system works, how to style tags, how to ID them, yada, yada. So I'm going to let you go with that. And, you know, if you have any questions, post them in comments. If you have any complaints, threats, whatever, put them in comments, and I'll review them all, and I'll, you know, carefully respond to all of them, especially the threats. And with that, I'm going to bid you a good evening. All right, I'll see you later.